Hey there, my name's Rod Yates and you're listening to Humans of Music, a Jaxsta podcast. Each episode I talk to a music creator or industry professional about their life and career, the ups and downs of their journey and the lessons they've learned along the way. And my guest today is American musician David Ryan Harris. David has forged a career as a solo artist, songwriter, producer, session musician and touring guitarist. His list of credits is long and populated with hits, having written songs for artists like Guy Sebastian and Jessica Mauboy, played guitar on albums by Alicia Keys, James Bay and John Mayer, and produced records by India, Ari and Hanson, to name a few. He was also John Mayer's longtime touring guitarist, all while forging his own career as a solo artist. In short, David is one of those artists that is incredibly successful and well respected, and yet he's never crossed over to household name status, which makes his perspective all the more interesting. David's had major label deals as a solo artist and with bands such as Follow For Now and Brand New Immortals, and he's learned lessons from them all, which he shares in this interview. But we started by talking about, what else, COVID-19, and how in practical terms it's impacted his job as a professional musician.
I'm pretty good. The patience is there. I think the thing that I didn't account for is just how long it's going to take to get to the other side. And now, before we were all sort of waiting to get back to where we were. Now it's like, I don't know how long this ride is going to take, and I don't know where we're going. Like, when it's over, I don't know what it's going to look like anyway. So it's not so much patience as it is a weird sort of anxiety, I think, for me. And, you know, I've used this, I'm an analogy guy, or metaphor guy. And, you know, it's like when this thing first started, it's like if you're waiting for a bus and you realize you missed the bus, you're like, okay, well, no panic. I'll just wait here 15 minutes. Another one will come. And then you wait another 15, another 30 minutes. And like other people start walking and you're like, I'm going to wait for the bus. It'll be here soon enough. And like, you know, 2 days later, you're like, I don't think the bus is coming. So I just sort of sat around when this thing happened just because I had afforded myself a little bit of the luxury of just being able to not panic about work and money. And also there was nothing I could do about it anyway. So I was like, all right, well, the universe is telling me to hang out with my kids. And I didn't come out to my studio. I didn't do anything. I was just like, all right, I'm going to sit here and wait on the bus. It'll be here in a few minutes. and you know, the bus still has not come. So now I'm kind of back up. I've done a lot of sort of reorganizing my studio and kind of getting that together and waiting on the muse to show up. Cause I haven't, she hasn't been around.
So has it changed the way that you think about things, the way that you think about how you'll work in the future?
Well, I think it's just given us all a few more options. I think I'm a glass half full kind of person. And so, the idea of writing from home, or for me, is an idea that I don't think would ever have even been considered before the pandemic in terms of doing Zoom sessions. Like, no one wanted to do them, and I don't want to do them indefinitely. I don't want that to be my new normal, but now that is a legitimate method of doing it that isn't crazy. And I don't think that any of us would have even given it a thought had this not happened and that was our only option. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. So that's the future. I mean, let's have a look at the past and let's go way back to the beginning. So you were born in Chicago and raised in Atlanta.
Yes.
When did you move to Atlanta?
About 7 or 8.
Okay.
7 or 8.
And that was because of your parents' work, was
because
it?
My dad was originally from Atlanta, so it was more of him just wanting to go home.
And what did your parents do?
You know, my mom, she was a secretary for like a medical billing company, and my dad had a bunch of jobs. He was just he did all kinds of stuff. He was a welder. I don't remember what he did at that age, but he was a traveling salesman at one point. He was a welder. I don't know. He's always just moving.
Yeah. And
I mean, just moving with his jobs. Like, we stayed in the same place. I only lived in maybe 2 houses, 2 places once we moved to Georgia, but he bounced around.
Okay. And did you have siblings as well?
I have a younger brother,
Okay.
5 years younger.
Is he in music?
He is not. He is not. He escaped.
And was there, I see you've spoken about your parents, their taste in music, and that they loved music, and I think your mum loved Chicago blues and the Doobie Brothers and 70s AM radio, and your dad loved bebop. But were they actually musical themselves?
No, my mom, she had an accordion when she was a little girl. She said that she wanted to play guitar, but my grandmother thought that wasn't very ladylike, and so she got her an accordion, which I don't know how that's any more ladylike, but she didn't play it. So yeah, she never played an instrument. She had like a little singing group with a few of her friends, and I think they sang at church. Okay. So like a little three-piece little girl group, but that was it.
And your dad had no interest?
No. Horrible singer. And yeah, no, he didn't play any instruments.
So where do you think you got it from?
I think the singing for me came first. I just loved singing, and I hear stories about me singing before I could talk. I had a grandmother that lived in Detroit, and I think we took a bus ride like from Chicago to Detroit, and she was like, "You sang and would not quit singing that whole bus ride." She's like, "You must have been 3 or 4, and I kept telling you to be quiet, and everyone around was like, oh, just let him sing." So the singing really did come natural, and then for me, I just wanted to be able to tell my own stories and write my own songs. So I wanted to be self-sufficient enough to write them myself, and so I figured I had to learn how to play something.
So you were quite young when you had that thought?
Well, the singing went from 3 or 4 until I was 15 or 16, and then I was like, I want to write songs. I want to have stuff that I want to say, and there was a certain amount of sort of DIY mentality around people that were really influential to me. I was a big Prince fan, and he had like his own way of doing things, and he played all the instruments, and he had like a community of like-minded people. And Stevie Wonder, played all those instruments, and it's like, oh, you can really sort of create your own world. I listened to songs in the key of life, and I distinctly remember sitting between the speakers, and it was a sort of a fold-out record. And I just sat in the middle of the speakers and, looked at the fold-out record, and I read all the lyrics and who played what. And I felt like I was in the middle of his world, and I just wanted some way to, kind of create the same thing.
And I understand as well that there was a show by Gino Vannelli that you attended that was a big moment. That was
my first concert was Gino Vannelli on the Brother to Brother tour, which for a kid's first concert, that's super heady music. Like my mom, she just passed away about 3 weeks ago, and I was telling somebody, I was like, my mom was so cool that my first, like most people were like, oh, my mom took me to see the Partridge Family. My mom, like it's some super lame thing. I was like, no, I went to see Gino Vannelli because my mom was just that cool. And I just loved, once again, this was someone who I'd studied the album cover. I looked at it a million times, and I knew the players on the record, but I didn't. I had no idea what the live experience was like. The electricity of being in that room and people waiting for him to come, and it's just super exciting. And he was, playing a white baby grand with hair flowing everywhere and his chest hair, and women throwing roses. I was like, that looks pretty cool.
How old are you at that concert?
I had to be 12 or 13.
Okay. And was it literally a moment where you got home and thought, all right, this is the life for me?
Yeah, I read or see lots of interviews with people where they're like, and this was the moment when I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan show. That was the moment. I didn't really have like a moment that was like a eureka thing. I was just like, I thought that was really, really cool. It was as if I had a lot of different pieces of a puzzle strewn about a room, and then I was like, wait a minute, all of these things go together. So that was just a really huge piece of a puzzle that I had yet to fully form and put together.
Okay. And what happened to the rest of your life, to schoolwork, to things like that, when you started putting these pieces of the puzzle together? Was it Did you get a tunnel vision, or were you still able to, I guess, operate in these other areas as well?
Yeah, my mom would not have allowed anything less than excellence in that regard. So I was still, a good student. Fortunately or unfortunately, I was really smart, so I didn't have to study very much, which meant I could kind of fuck off a bit and just, I could do my lessons without studying. But I definitely, A's and B's were expected in my house, and so
Okay.
I sort of towed that line.
So was your mother supportive of your move into music when you made it?
Um, so I was in a band. I started a band just after college, and as the band started taking off, my grades in school just got worse and worse, and I was like, I kind of want to do this band thing, and I'm gonna try it, see what happens, and if it doesn't work, I'll go back to school. Famous last words. And she didn't understand the music because it was a little more punk. Well, it was a lot more kind of like punk rock. It was not super melodic. I listened to some of the recordings, and I quite frankly I could not sing at all. Like it was a loud rock and roll band, and we were stage diving, and it was, for whatever age my mom was, I'm sure it just seemed like awful racket.
Mm.
But we were doing well regionally, and got a deal, and kind of chased that whole thing down. So once she saw that I could make a living at it, even though it was something that it wasn't for her, and she could see, a lot of people don't know that there are people that make a decent living that aren't on billboards and, at the top of the charts. So she saw, okay, well, there is an audience for this thing that he does, and they play shows and people show up and whatever. I guess they're doing okay, even though, they're not on, they're not on television or on MTV or whatever.
Mm. I think that band was Follow for Now,
Follow for Now,
which I do want to talk to you about. But just before we get to that, you mentioned that when you're about 15 or 16 and you wanted to learn an instrument because you had things that you wanted to say. What was happening in your life? What were the things that were informing the things that you wanted to say at that point?
It was really, how kids in high school, 14, 15, 16, they do the thing where they write on the cover of their notebook, or at least I did I basically just wanted to do that with songs. I didn't have any burning, any trauma that I wanted to express or any of that stuff. It's more, I just wanted to kind of doodle out loud and just kind of flex that part of me and see what it could do, so to speak. Because the songs were really sophomoric and awful.
I think I read you talking about you learning guitar and the fact you didn't have any sort of formal lessons. Where were you? Were you just playing along to records? What were you listening to?
Yeah, just playing along to records. My mom was really into. She loved Stevie Ray Vaughan. That was her guy. So that was the first thing that I can really remember trying to pick out. Other than like, I really loved The Fix. And I love The Police, and a lot of their guitar parts. I could kind of wrap my head around how to do them, and even some of the early Prince, like Dirty Mind era Prince. A lot of it's just kind of like power chords, but super clean and whatever. But so Stevie was one of the first things that I was like, oh wow, this guy can play. Like he can really, he can really do it. And so I tried to figure out a couple of his songs and a few licks, and then that sort of opened the door to like more Hendrix stuff and more BB King and Albert King. But I really, that period of time, like the mid 80s, was a crazy great weird time for guitar players, and I had to decide if I wanted to be finger tapping guitar whiz, or I wanted to be someone that could play songs when I was 65 years old.
Right.
I saw, there was a show on TV, used to come on Sunday nights here, called Michelob Presents Sunday Night. And it was that the house band was David Sanborn and Hiram Bullock. Omar Hakim was on drums. Marcus Miller played bass. And they would have, every Sunday would be some artist that everyone knew. Like they would have Miles Davis, and then they would have like some other band that no one had ever heard of. And one Sunday they had Pop Staples from the Staples Center on. And it was just him and a 335, just him singing the song with a 335. And something in me was like, oh wow, these songs that I'm playing now, I want to be sure that I can do them when I'm 65 and not look ridiculous.
Right.
So I made the decision. Like I play guitar well enough to write songs.
Okay.
I still love it. There's still licks that I hear that I'm like, I want to try to figure that out. But I'm a meat and potatoes guitar player, and so I was just sort of dabbling, early on, 15, 16. I was just trying to like figure out what is it that I want to say, and quite frankly, I guess I was a little bit too lazy to keep up with the. I love the first Van Halen, but I didn't think I had what it took to be, to play that stuff on the first Van Halen record.
You weren't going down the Shrapnel Records route?
No. I enjoyed it. I knew all those guys, knew all their names. I, was a religious Guitar Player magazine reader, Mike Varney and, I was into it. I didn't want to do it for me.
Yeah. So where does that what you were just talking about, wanting to be able to play at 65 and not look stupid, where did Follow for Now fit into that? Because I've heard that record and it's pretty wild. I mean, and it's also very of its time in that it's got that funk, it's got metal, it's got punk. It's kind of like this melting pot that was kind of encouraged at that time. How did that band come about?
It came about because like I lived in an all black neighborhood, but I went to an all white high school. So, I say that I got my Parliament, Funkadelic, and Run DMC at home, and then I went to school and I got my, Pink Floyd and Black Sabbath and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But so when I would bring those influences home, my friends in the neighborhood were like, "Oh, you listen to that sort of weird music," and so the people that make the weird music just sort of find each other. Just because, like, there weren't a lot of black guys on my side of town listening to quote unquote weird music. So there were just like 3 or 4 guys that, I'd have somebody say, "Oh, you like the Police and Missing Persons? I have this other friend that goes to this other school. He plays drums. You guys will probably get along." And so, we kind of got together without any sort of, political leanings, or we weren't trying to start an all black rock band or any of that. It was just these people lived in our, we lived close enough to each other. And once again, I learned how to be a band in that band. I learned how to compose for a group in that group, but we were all very much just figuring it out. I mean, we knew enough to be dangerous. We didn't think anything of having a blues song next to a metal song or a funk song, not because we were trying to, really shake things up. It was like, well, that's the stuff in our record collection, and we just didn't know any better. Yeah. So, I mean, that's what that was about. It was really just, we were too young to know that we weren't quote unquote supposed to do it.
Which is really freeing. That's awesome.
Yeah. In fact, I kind of feel like at this stage in my career, I realize sort of the more success you have or the longer you do it, the easier it is to fall into patterns that are fear-based in terms of being a creator. And the people that really push the needle and are sort of vanguards, they somehow figure out a way to not be fearful in their creation. And I definitely have gotten to a place where I feel like my quote unquote fans or people that know what I do expect a certain thing from me. And, it's just sort of the nature of the beast. It's like, I need to eat. So I need to do the thing that is paying the bills. Like, even if in my heart, I decided I wanted to make a record that was, trombones and spoons, because that's what really moved me. You saw Hendrix, like he likes to eat. So I gotta, I I can't make that record. But Follow for Now, we just didn't care. And we're young enough to be okay with sleeping on people's sofas and, kind of roughing it. So it was a magical period for me just because all cards were in play.
Yeah. And I know listening to, growing up during that time and listening to music at that time, the idea of a black rock band, even though there were bands like Fishbone and 24/7 Spies and Bad Brains, of course, Living Colour blew things wide open, but it was still very much an anomaly. What was your experience in that regard? Did you experience bias? Was there any pushback?
For us, like, we probably played 120 shows, 150 shows a year. Like, we were on the road constantly. So any sort of wall that was put up in front of us industry wide, we ignored because we knew that we were connecting with people. And so we kind of just didn't think about that part of it. And, it did get frustrating when, you talk to a label and they'd say, well, something to the effect of like, well, we already have a Living Colour for a couple reasons. First of all, it's like, well, you have 15 bands that sound like Warrant. They sound like Warrant. They look like Warrant. And I'm not saying that just because I'm looking, I'm savvy enough with the genre to know that these bands all sound alike. First of all. Second of all, we don't sound like Living Colour. Like, we're not the same thing. So that got to be a little frustrating. We'd see other bands sort of break through, or I remember being a little upset when the Chili Peppers kind of got the break before Fishbone, because Chili Peppers looked up to Fishbone. And it was like, well, Fishbone, like, I mean, live show, one of the best live shows of all time. And they were definitely a better live band than the Chili Peppers. And so, I resist then and now the temptation to sort of, I don't want to say play a race card, but I do know that it is frustrating to do something that is outside the box, because the industry is just set up in a way to plug people into pre-existing boxes, and we just didn't fit into any. And we, quite frankly, didn't really feel like we fit into the black rock box. Like, we made great friends with 24/7 Spies. I'm still friends with those guys. I talk to them all the time. And a couple of guys in Fishbone, I still talk to them as well. So we related kind of as friends, but as a part of a movement, it's just never been my thing.
Yeah. And I don't want to spend the whole interview talking about Follow for Now, but just there are a couple of songs which struck me as just still being really relevant lyrically. In particular, the songs Trust and White Hood. White Hood's got that line, supposed to pledge allegiance to the flag that lets this bullshit corrode, and talks about I like the red, white, and blue, but I won't tolerate the white hood. These are themes that are still really relevant today. Was this typical of your experience back then as well?
Yeah, I didn't think of us as a political band. We never talked about stuff that we didn't see kind of firsthand. But actually, it's interesting you bring the band up and sort of a re-examination of the lyrics and stuff. A couple months ago, I got a call about seeing if we could reform to play a show, and I was like, maybe. And so I started going back through old tapes, and we definitely had, I don't know, there are probably 40, 50 recordings, stuff that didn't make that record, and just looking at the lyrics, those songs in particular, Trust, with the sort of distrust of the police, and White Hood, and even Evil Wheel, looking at those things and going, wow, it is I didn't even think we were a political band, but there's no band right now that is even as political as that now. And it's a shame that those, you hear it over and over again. It's a shame that we're still talking about some of this stuff. But it made me feel, I was kind of proud of myself. Like, all right, well, this is what I was doing when I was, kind of raging against the machine. As a young man, I was saying stuff that was relevant, and not because I had any sort of, I didn't have an agenda. We were really just talking about, our lives and stuff that had gone on with us. We weren't trying to lead marches or, whatever. We were just talking about our lives. And, that gives me, gives me a chuckle, and it's, kind of lets me let myself off the hook for that period of my life. It's like, all right, well, you were doing what you were supposed to do.
Yeah. And one of those things that you did as well was do some shows with Pearl Jam on their 10 tour,
Yes.
which, an incredible moment in rock history. What are your memories of those shows?
I was not a fan of Pearl Jam at all before playing with them, but show number one, like we met all the guys and met Eddie, and Eddie kind of came off as, he was friendly but a super brooding kind of guy. We, for whatever political, society mirror we kind of like to party. So it was just, with him, it was a little bit like, oh man, like, you should loosen up. Like, this is, we're just kind of looking at him like, why are you so upset? But show number one, I just had so much respect for his commitment. His intensity was real, and it made me think that his brooding pre-show is almost like a tiger kind of walking back and forth in a cage, because they just, the band at that point was just on fire, and to this day I think they're one of the best live bands to do it. So, and obviously we didn't know that they were going to be as big as they were, because 10 had just come out. We were one of their first tours when Jeremy started kind of taking off on MTV. So it was cool to be there for that and see that kind of take off.
After the break, David talks about meeting John Mayer for the first time, why playing solo petrified him, and how best to deal with hecklers. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with David Ryan Harris. When Follow For Now was supporting Pearl Jam, David had to leave the tour early when his first son was born, and we pick up the conversation talking about how that event changed his life.
In that moment, it changed me in that I felt like I needed to have some sort of direction, or just some sort of way to pay for my family. And Follow For Now at that point started to kind of look like it might be a little bit of a dead end. And I just started kind of writing songs with other people, which I'd never done before. And so I think having Miles kind of made me spreading my wings a little bit more urgent. So in terms of career wise, it definitely pushed me out of the nest, so to speak.
And did you take things from Follow For Now that have informed the way that you've operated since? Any particular lessons?
I'm sure I have, but I've never been in a collaborative situation like that situation. So a lot of the lessons is, musically speaking, I just don't have opportunity to use. 'Cause like I learned how to be a man with those guys. I learned how to, do everything with those guys. Like, I learned how to drink with those guys. I learned how to, do so many things in that group of people. And there was such we were friends, we were brothers, we lived together. A lot of my experiences after that just weren't the same. So like, I know those lessons are in me. Most of them, I just haven't been able to put into practice, because I guess there's just not as much skin in the game.
And I know that after Follow For Now finished, you did some shows with Dion Farris and did a little bit of writing with her. And I believe you actually did your first solo shows supporting her while you were playing in her band as well.
Yes.
And I saw a quote where you were saying that at that point in your life, playing solo was the most petrifying experience you could imagine.
Yes.
Why did it scare you so?
Well, I wasn't one of those people that started out with acoustic guitar and graduated to electric. I started with electric, and as soon as I could kind of, tune it, I was kind of playing with other people. So the idea of being like a singer-songwriter, first of all, it just wasn't a cool thing. I think Eric Clapton and the Unplugged record kind of opened that back up for a lot of people. But when I started, that just wasn't a thing. And with Follow For Now, we had 5 guys, 3 I was kind of the main lead singer, but we had two other singers. Everybody had, the three of us had mics, and in between songs, if I wasn't saying something, somebody else was saying something. And if I dropped a note, then somebody else had it, or if, everybody always had each other's back. And so, the idea of the focus being on me with an acoustic guitar, there are no pedals, there's no distortion. I can't hide behind the wah-wah. I can't, it's just me being naked. It was just really, really scary. And I was, just at the very beginning stages of figuring out what my voice could really do. So it was just, I was just naked. It was terrifying.
How did you learn to deal with it? You had to learn quick, I imagine.
I just continued falling forward, and I generally don't listen to shows. I don't listen to recordings of shows. I'm like, I was there. I know what it was like. And I'm my own worst critic. And so I'll just end up picking the thing apart. So I just kept doing it, and I kept doing it. And I, sort of mentally took note of the things that worked, the things that lit an audience up, or the things that, even in Follow for Now, we would know how to sort of read a crowd. It's like, all right, well, we're in the South, so we'll structure our set this way for this group of people. And so just learning how to do that, early on, doing the solo thing, it was just a matter of just doing it more and more, learning how to deal with hecklers and, all that kind of stuff.
What's the best way to deal with a heckler?
Oh man, it just depends. Now I feel like there are a lot of, listening rooms where the audience will do my dirty work for me. Like if someone's talking, the audience will generally tell them to be quiet. But there's I learned a huge lesson in that, for me, dynamics are key. So you get, I'll get kind of loud for a bit, and then I bring it down to a whisper, so that the people that are talking really loud when I'm playing loud, then when I come down, they're screaming. And I think, in terms of tempo, in terms of how long I hold sections out, it's all about trying to keep people engaged. And the other thing is, like, sometimes you have to know, I'm not going to turn this audience. So you don't try to turn those audience. You don't try to turn those people. You try to focus on the people that are actually paying attention. And it's like, all right, I'm doing a show for you people. So yeah, I've definitely put in my 10,000 hours doing solo shows, and it's something that I love doing it.
Yeah. And I know you did your first solo album in 97, I think, with Brendan O'Brien, who had produced the Follow for Now album as well. And I think it's sold around 10,000 copies, but one of those people who bought it was John Mayer, and he became such a huge fan, and he actually ended up tracking you down in Atlanta. What do you remember of meeting John for the first time?
Well, first of all, I was just shocked that someone in another state had that record. Even though it was on Columbia, I just figured if there were 10,000 sold, I just figured all of them were sold in the state of Georgia. And the fact that, someone had gone to Berkeley and listened to it at Berkeley, I was just shocked of the reach that it had. And I mean, we talked about music and we loved a lot of the same things. So it was really just feeling like I'd found a kindred spirit. And our age difference isn't as huge now, but then, I mean, I was 30 and he was, he's 9 years younger than me. So he was just kind of like a kid. I loved his playing, and I thought his lyrics were smart, and, we liked a lot of the same things. And that was just kind of it. We enjoyed playing shows together. We would do the Writer in the Round things together. And, I think he's kind of helped me step up my game in terms of, or just help me focus what I wanted to do as a solo artist, in terms of how I wanted to craft my songs. Cause there's the picture of the, singer songwriter coffee house person that plays these sort of, languid, brooding kind of, folk chord stuff, and his stuff wasn't like folk stuff. So seeing him do that in a solo context, it was like, oh, okay, I can bring some of my rhythmic stuff that I've done in Follow for Now, and kind of bring all of those things into focus in this sort of solo context.
And talking about your solo career, and because you went and ended up playing with John for around about 9 years, I think, was that a big mindset change for you in terms of your solo career? Because I guess for some degree, you probably had to put that on hold for a bit.
Yeah, I mean, for me, the first time I played, he was like, "Hey, man," he was just sort of starting to take off. I think the first record had just come out or had been out for a while. And he said, "If you ever want to come out and just hang out, play some songs, there's always a bunk for you." And so I went out and played a few shows, maybe a month's worth of shows. And then I kind of jumped off of the tour. And then I moved to Los Angeles, purportedly to produce this Neville Brothers record. And then the Neville Brothers record thing never happened. And I just ran out of money. Like I was about to get evicted. And I had a couple things happen that really kind of kept me afloat. One was I did a song for this Biker Boys movie, and the other was to start playing with John. And it was really, it's evolved over time. But at the time, it was just like, wow, I get to just play. Like, it's not my thing. I just get to hang out and play and see how he deals with this stuff. And, I did sort of have to put my thing on hold, but I didn't really have that much going on anyway. And it just so happened that, when he would finish his run, I would go do something else. And then we couldn't be working at the same time, but it just happened that, one thing followed the other. And, I think when you're playing with other people, you want to be by yourself. And when you're by yourself, you want to be with other people. So, just about the time we were all, sort of getting tired of the ins and outs of playing these, big shows and just moving around so quickly in this little box, that would end. And then I could go do my thing and, feel some sense of relief and responsibility. And then I would go back to this thing, that I loved. I always said that his music was some of the only music that I would put my thing on hold to do. It was like that, there are very few, I would say me playing with him was like my friend asking me to help him move. There are very few people that I would go help them move. So, and when he would call, I was like, all right, I'll help you move. I love this music. I love you as a person. And, a lot of my audience I owe to that relationship.
Mm. What did you see of success on that scale that surprised you?
Wow. I don't think anything really surprised me because I didn't have enough of a preconceived notion of what it was supposed to be. If anything, the thing that surprised me was how tame it all was, because, any stuff that I'd seen of like supposed to be backstage stuff, backstage debauchery, it was like on the Motley Crue sort of on that level. And it was certainly none of that going on with this thing. I mean, it was, I thought it was interesting how you basically have a whole town and you move this whole town around the world. But I didn't really, nothing really shocked me because I didn't know what to expect.
Okay.
Even now, I guess, you sort of, people only look at the good parts and they see, the fame and the money and all of that stuff. But there's a tremendous amount of responsibility. And there's a tremendous amount of, like, he's always like super kind to people and, fans and people that come up, and it's got to be a burden at a certain point. So that sometimes I see this happening and I'm like, you know what? That's not for me, because I would tell that bitch to get out of my face. Or, so it's, he handles it incredibly well. And it's been great for me to be so close to it. To see how kind he is, to see how, they say a fish stinks from the head down. So the crew that we've had over the years, everybody's great. Everybody gets along well. And that all kind of goes back to the top. So that's been one of the big lessons that I've learned that I try to, try to use in all other areas of my life.
Sure. As things get bigger in a situation like that and responsibilities grow, and then there's also other commitments like media, etc., does the stage become an even more sacred space?
Sure. I mean, you travel for 13 hours to play for 45 minutes, and that is the place where, with his music, especially now, we went out, I guess it was 2018, and you look out and some of these songs were, 20 years old, and you look out and you see these people's faces, and, people are crying, and you realize people have made memories to these songs, and people, we're bringing these things to light to them in a way that is really kind of magical. Music is everywhere, and to have a body of work that that means so much to so many people, it makes your work feel slightly more important than just was that the right guitar solo? Mm-hmm. Is this the right tone? Or it's like, oh, we're doing important work, especially in the time that we live in, because people, you look forward to that Saturday night. You got the ticket, and it says, Saturday night. That's when the show is, and I'm enough of a fan that I remember what that feels like. So it's humbling, but it also is pretty cool, important work.
I think one thing we share in common is that the need when you're attending a show to be there for the beginning of the show. Like that to me, that is the peak.
Gotta have it. That tension, and I don't think my wife has it. She knows I have it, but like I get super antsy. Like I'm like,
Me too.
I don't need a beer. I'm fine. I gotta get to, like, the house lights go down and I'm not there. I'm pissed. Like, I have to see it.
It's so funny. I feel exactly the same way. One of your projects, Brand New Immortals, that you did with Johnny Colt from the Black Crowes, was a really interesting project. And I know you were signed by Lars Ulrich from Metallica, signed to Elektra. What transpired with that? What happened with that deal and with that band?
I'd known Johnny and all the Black Crowes guys. We rehearsed in the same space, so we'd spend a lot of time with each other. I had gotten sober around 2000, maybe 99, and Johnny had been sober for a while. I think I hung out with him at a Horde Fest. I thought the Black Crowes, like the second record to I don't know, all the records that Jack Joseph Puig did, those are some of the best sounding records, and hands down, that was also one of the best live bands ever. So whenever they were around, I would always try to go to a show. And I think we just started talking at a show, and we just connected on sort of the sobriety thing and being in the middle of this circus and trying to stay sober. And we were really excited about OK Computer. It had just come out. I think Johnny was about to make the jump. Recording music on a computer had just sort of gotten to the point where the consumer could do it. So it was just sort of a confluence of all of those things. There was this program called Acid where you could, make loops and sort of stretch stuff. And I had like this weird Roland guitar synth modeler thing. And so just seeing how elastic we could make everything was just really exciting. And sitting in front of a computer screen and moving stuff around, it really just sort of came from that. We weren't really trying to start a band. We were really just, excited about the process. And then we ended up, ultimately ended up getting a deal. Brendan got involved, helped us do like an EP, and we ended up getting signed on the basis of that EP.
And did Lars have a label at the time? Was that his deal with
Elektra? It was through Elektra.
Yeah.
And so we had another friend of ours, a guy named Dan McCarroll, who ran EMI Publishing for a while, ran Capitol Records. Now he does something with Amazon. Dan was A&R for Lars's label, so Dan came down, saw the band. We had a bit of a bidding war. There was the alternative radio station in Atlanta, 99X, was like the number one alternative station in the country. And their PD started playing this song of ours, Reason Why, without us having a record deal. So, of course, all the other labels, all the labels are like, well, who's this band that doesn't have a deal that's on 99X? We got to snap this band up. So we came out to LA and made the rounds, met with a bunch of labels, and ultimately signed with Dan, because Dan was one of us, a musician. We'd known him prior because he played on some records for Brendan, and Lars was Lars Ulrich. So it just seemed like, we have two musicians kind of at the helm of this thing that know what it takes to do it. So yeah, we went with that. And then, Lars decided after about a year's time that he wanted to go back to playing drums in Metallica. I think they'd kind of taken a break. It was during that period where they were getting therapy. Yeah.
And that was it then, was it?
Yeah, that was it. I mean, we did the one record. We didn't really tour very much. It was kind of hard to tour. That was also really early in people playing along the tracks. And we couldn't figure out how to do it in a way that gave our drummer control, like triggering and all that stuff. It just wasn't as easy as it is now. And like, I think we did this other thing with a hard disk recorder, and the hard disk recorder would skip. And so we weren't a band that got in a 15 passenger van and, just rode around from town to town. So once Lars decided he didn't want to do the label anymore, we just all kind of looked at each other and we're like, well, we're all friends, but we're not really a band. So we're done, right?
After the break, David talks about combating what he calls fear-based creation and how he's come to terms with some of his projects that haven't succeeded commercially. Welcome back to Humans of Music and my interview with David Ryan Harris. As you've heard throughout this interview, David has had some incredible career opportunities, although not all have succeeded commercially as he'd have hoped. And we pick up the conversation talking about how he learned to deal with that.
I just try. I mean, because it's I feel incredibly lucky to not only have had one major record label deal, I had three. So there must be some degree of talent there, I guess, or really good at first dates or something. And I just, I try not to reflect on it too much. To be honest, I think some of the lack of success with those projects does kind of creep its way into fear-based creation, because you start to go, well, maybe if I had done this thing, then it would have worked. Or maybe, people need more of that thing. And then you start, leaning in that direction. And, that part is difficult to deal with. The sort of fiscal part of it, and not being a rich, famous musician, that part is sort of whatever. The creative thing really bums me out more. It's like, sometimes I wish I could listen to a record like my 9-year-old listens to a record. It's just, he's not like, oh, I wonder what kick drum that is, or, I bet that's a Strat through a twin, whatever. And, we talked about it earlier, that sort of fear-based thing is really, it can be stifling. And having those records, come out and not do very well, they did sort of, I guess, sort of progressively play into this fear-based narrative that I have with myself. Is what I'm doing great, or should I try to make it more like this other person's thing? And so it's a constant battle to not go to the center, unless that's where my heart wants to go.
How do you combat that?
I just cry a lot. Well, now I know it's a thing. So I'm aware of it in a much more present way. I have this friend of mine, Edwin, calls it his give a fuckerator. And he's like, I just need to, I need to turn off my give a fuckerator. And so, this year was supposed to really be about that for me. I'd done this other record I was going to put out and kind of let that be my thing for, quote unquote, David Ryan Harris. And then I just wanted to start making music that was whatever I wanted it to be. But then, the whole pandemic started and it was like, well, it doesn't make sense to throw out all the bathwater right now.
Will that happen though at some point?
To be perfectly honest, the best case scenario for me, in a perfect world, I would just produce records for people. I get so much joy out of feeling like I've helped someone realize an artistic vision that they have. I love being in the center of a room and, giving ideas about, I think this kick drum pattern goes with this bass part and you guys try this thing, count it in, sort of conducting that. I get so much joy out of that. I would like to, so in a perfect world, I would have success doing that so that creatively I could just make whatever kind of records I wanted to make and I don't have to worry about feeding my family with that. I mean, I do think given the space to do it, I could make music that is, I think I could make some really cool, arresting, compelling, different music. It's just, you have a house and cars and kids and, I can't go make, like I want to make a record that is Outkast meets Queens of the Stone Age playing the White Album in Muscle Shoals.
Wow.
But, at the same time, I got to eat. So,
that's really hard.
Yes. Yeah. But I think, just being aware of where I'm creating from and trying to make sure that it is from the center and not from my center, as opposed to trying to move myself towards someone else's center.
Is that something you've learned through your own experience, or is that something you've learned through working with people like Indy RE and Dave Matthews and John, or does it all just come together in one big glob of influence?
It's a little bit of both, and as much those people as you mentioned as it is people that no one will ever hear of. Seeing people kind of compromise their vision and then have it not be successful. Like there's nothing more heartbreaking than not being successful while knowing that you weren't yourself in the first place. It's like, if I'm going to fail, I want to fail as me. I don't want to fail compromising my vision. And I've seen that happen enough times. I've seen it, happen to some degree to myself. And that's the worst place to be. That's the worst place to be. So yeah, some of it is, trying not to compromise in my vision, or earning the trust of collaborators to let them follow what their vision is. It's like, well, we don't necessarily need to listen to Spotify top 10 to see what we're going to do today. Like, what do you want to say? So yeah, it's a bit of both. It's been my journey and other people's journey.
That conversation about Spotify top 10, is that one that you find happens more and more these days? Obviously, Spotify is relatively new. You wouldn't have been having that conversation 10 years ago, but just that way of thinking, is that something that you have to deal with?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's how some people work. And, don't get me wrong. I'm not talking shit about pop music or about Spotify or the top 10. It's just, it just seems weird to say, I'm going to look at, I'm going to base my vision on, what's happening on the charts.
I was just going to wrap up the interview by saying that, Jaxsta is about giving credit where credit is due. Are there people that you would give credit to for helping you get where you are today?
Oh man, there are a couple of people. There's one woman, her name's Val Bisharat. She will probably, it'd be great if she listened to this podcast. She was a publisher that I had when I first moved to Los Angeles, and quite frankly, one of my biggest champions ever. I still meet people, and I'll meet someone for the first time and they'll be like, "Oh, so you're David Ryan Harris." Val Bisharat would not quit talking about you. And Val hasn't worked in the music business for 16 years. But she was just really good for me in helping me navigate this thing, and just, basically telling me that I was good enough to do what I'm doing. So yeah, she was huge for me.
Okay. And you mentioned there are a few people. Anyone else spring to mind? Or if it's just Val, that's fine.
There's Val, there's Katie Donovan, another publisher. John, quite frankly, for just being, sort of both a peer and sort of a North Star in a lot of ways. So many, like, this is Jaxsta, so I can talk about engineers and all of that sort of behind the scenes people, the Chad Blakes of the world. I love how he sees and hears music, George Martin, Brian Wilson, guys that were just sort of not following the script. They were like just doing it as they went along. You pick up, little elements of what's around, and you just try to build something new with those elements. And those, Chad and Brian Wilson. I'm trying to think of someone else that is like really. I love John Bryan. I really love the first 3 Kanye West records. Mm-hmm. All of those people take elements and they put existing elements together in a way that you've never heard before, and help you sort of see the world in a new way. And that's been incredibly helpful to me.
Nice. David, thank you so much for all your time. It's been so great chatting to you.
Oh, thank you so much, man.
And that's it for another episode of Humans and Music. A big thanks to David for his time, and thank you for listening. This episode was mixed by Lachlan Mitchell from Parliament Studios in Annandale, and the incidental music and theme song were written and performed by Sam Lockwood. Please remember to subscribe to the Humans of Music podcast so you never miss an episode. Share it amongst your friends, and jump online and rate and review it. And remember, Jaxsta Pro is currently free. So if you make music or work behind the scenes in the music industry, head to jaxsta.com and sign up to become a Jaxsta Pro member. Until the next episode of Humans of Music, I'm Rod Yates. Thanks for listening.